Okay, welcome to another Vervoe webinar. It's 8 a.m. here in Melbourne, 6 p.m. in New York and DC, 3 p.m. on the West Coast, and time for bed in Europe. This is the second in a series of webinars that we're hosting on the skills shortage. Last week we talked about how we can improve the candidate experience. Today we're going to talk about employer branding. We have with us as our expert panelist Lindagrace, Cruz, who leads employer brand at Salesforce. And for those of you who sort of haven't kept up with Salesforce, Salesforce is up to 60,000 employees now and market cap of over 200 billion. So excited to have Lindagrace join us. Lindagrace, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here and to spend a little time virtually sitting down with you today.
It's great to have you, and we've got a lot to get through, so let's get straight into it. So to start off with, employer brand, who is it for? Is the goal to sort of make the company attractive to everyone on the planet, or should we be targeted? And is it about attraction, or is it also relevant to our existing employees?
Yeah, that's a great question to kick it off. Really, employer brand has two main audiences. So yes, it is your main vehicle for trying to attract and recruit, but a lot of organizations don't see it as for its other key audience pool, and that's really your current employees. My role at Salesforce actually sits within the employee engagement team. And so what we want is to engage our current employees through our employer brand as well. And so when you think about employer brand, it's really for both recruitment and retention. So two main audiences when we think about employer brand.
So can you unpack that a little bit more? So I think most people, myself included, when they think of employer brand, they think of recruitment, and they think of the career side and videos and things like that. And so if I'm an employee of the company, what's an example? How is that? How do I interact with employer brand?
Yeah, every single person that is part of a company, every single person tuning in today that's listening right now, you are an extension of your employer brand. And so whenever you interface with anyone on the outside, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's your, friend that's looking for an opportunity, whether it's strangers that you just meet in a cafe or wherever you are at a family reunion, you are an extension of your employer brand. And so we should be looking at it as, this is a way to amplify the stories from the inside. By making sure that we create opportunities for our current employees to share what it's like on the inside to the outside. So I think that's a kind of a high level of how it really works for the employees on the inside right now.
So is that another way of saying that we want people who are looking at the company from the outside to see what's real as opposed to marketing? Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of concept. When I like to think of employer brand, I see it more like a Venn diagram, right? And so a key element to knowing your employer brand and amplifying it is knowing what people think about you externally. So you want to take the idea of like what people are thinking about you externally and marrying it with how you want to be known as a company. So that's a little bit of your marketing that you're referring to. And taking both of those and kind of overlapping them with the reality. So you want to amplify, right, like where the overlap happens, what people are actually saying and what you actually want to be known for as a company. That's your true effective employer brand. And we want that to be kind of taking the spotlight because, again, that discussion about not just recruitment, retention, we want those folks coming in to see, how this was marketed to me originally is what really exists. And I'm happy with that because that aligns with my expectations. So it kind of works in several different ways.
Okay, so we don't want people to sort of be sold something that's not real and then come in and not have that promise delivered on. I get that. So let's talk about the market, and specifically, is employer brand something that we do the same way in any any time of year or in any market conditions, or is it something that should adapt and adjust based on market conditions or circumstances? For example, right now, we've got an unusual market dynamic where, maybe 9 months ago, employed companies weren't hiring, and there were layoffs and furloughs and things like that, and a lot of applicants, and now it's flipped on its head, and seemingly there are no candidates anywhere. They've disappeared, and there are more vacancies than humans on the planet. So does employer brand adjust to that, or do we just continue business as usual?
That's a great question. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I feel like I'm seeing a lot of organizations in both of those camps. The most effective employer brands really ignite trust in who they're talking to in terms of potential candidates, right? Job seekers. And trust being paramount, a lot of trust is lost when your employer brand doesn't feel current, right? And so I think my short answer to this is you absolutely need to take what's relevant and find a way to root an aspect of today's and current events relevancy into your employer brand that you have facing externally. So with regards to that, I talked about mistrust, losing trust with those folks on the outside. A lot of what's on the web, right? If there's misalignment in your messaging, or if you're not keeping current on an aspect, like on an employer site or even on your career site, there's outdated information, that automatically puts up a red flag for candidates, for job seekers. All the more if you're not responding to current events, or you seem kind of, we use this tone deaf, this term tone deaf. If it's not feeling like it really jives with the moment, that also raises another flag with prospective job seekers. So I think it's absolutely critical at this point in time in this unusual market, like you said, to be pivoting and just reflecting reality right now.
So you mentioned being tone deaf, and I'm going to ask you in a minute to give an example of something that companies can do that's relevant to now. But I want to ask you about the tone deafness. So, something that's inescapable at the moment is this notion of we're returning to the office, or we're not returning to the office, we're staying remote forever, or we're going to do this hybrid thing. And then we're going to do this hybrid thing, but actually now we're not going to do it because Delta's surging. And we're going to make it mandatory for everyone to be vaccinated, or we're not going to make it mandatory for everyone to be vaccinated. And it's impossible to please everybody. And we're seeing companies right across the spectrum. And I think the sort of overall sentiment of employees is confusion. So how do all these things come into play? And if you're in talent, or if you're an employer brand practitioner, and presumably you might have some say, but not the final say on, your company deciding to mandate vaccination or bring everyone back to the office. How do you manage that? Because clearly that is going to be an issue for people in their decision of whether I want to join the company or stay at the company.
Yes, that's an interesting question, because as we saw in this past year, a lot of job seekers have changed what they're looking for. And when we think about what they're looking for last year, right, a lot of the trends and data were showing job seekers were looking for aspects of like safety, stability, security. Now we're going into this different phase where we're talking about returning to the office or what have you, hybrid environments. The bottom line is every company can work on their employer brand at this time, regardless of your reality of if you're going back or if you're staying hybrid or if you're staying at home. What you have to do, I think at this time that's most important, resonates most with job seekers, is really talk about the elements of your culture that take care of the people. So even if you're coming back to the office, like what are some great aspects that are going to be incorporated in this return to work wave? Are there going to be more opportunities, focusing on like collaboration, or do you provide PPE, or, is there a different kind of setup to the workday where it's staggered? Those type of things are aspects of the culture that you can focus on and get excited about, and how you take care of your people. So regardless of where you're at with that, I think, that is going to be key to showing off like how you take care of the people that you have. It's going to be a great opportunity for that.
Is there something either at Salesforce or with one of your customers that you've seen that you thought, hey, this is a really cool, or this is a tangible thing that is a good example beyond the sort of foosball table, the ping pong table kind of nonsense, but something real that a company's offering to people that's relevant, that's beyond, not something that is necessarily in the past was good, but is relevant to now, to the current situation that people are going through. Can you give some examples that people can take away?
Absolutely. So one company that I know of here that I'll just keep unnamed, I don't know if they're if they want me to name them or not, but essentially, as we know, in the pandemic, a lot of women have lost their careers. They've had to take a step back for childcare, for managing the home, for those type of things. Women in particular have been hit really hard. And so one particular company that I know of has instilled like a returnship for women. It's a program that helps women get back into work, get acclimated, comfortable, talk about flexible schedules and that sort of thing, really focused to this market. I think that's a great example of highlighting, a new program that's come to fruition. We at Salesforce, in thinking about how we've pivoted in this past year, all of our onboarding is virtual, right? And so thinking about having people come on board at this time, how do we give that infusion of culture? There's actually opportunities to volunteer all together in your first week at Salesforce virtually. So you're creating a community and doing good for the environment, good for the planet, all together in your first week. And that's just been a pivot that has happened at this time. And we talk about our VTO opportunities all the time. Also, where I'm seeing, opportunities to just give that dose of culture is on career sites, on your employer branding sites, reflecting the how people are today, having them, encouraging them to post their own pics of what their work life is like right now, and showing kind of the reality. Oh, they have a cat, right? They're hanging out with their dog, and it just humanizes the company to a level that I think we just didn't have that opportunity before, and that really wasn't the focus before. Before it was like all about sexiness, right? Like ping pong tables, like you said, and like barista at the in the break room, and all of this like cool stuff. Well, people have changed. People are looking for like a lifestyle change, and they want to see companies that really take care and are lead with empathy, and accommodate for kind of all the challenges that people are facing today.
Well, it's funny that last point, it's funny you say that, because just before we started this webinar, you saw my kids barge into the room, and we had the discussion about, am I in the office, or is this a home office? And I mean, clearly our life, this sort of, we used to talk about this work-life balance. I mean, now it's just our life and our work, it's all in the same place. And I think we're well past that point of separation now. Okay, so it sounds like the sort of common thread in all the examples you gave is really about helping people. It's beyond mental health, but really caring about people, and less about sort of perks, but more about helping people, caring for people, helping them get the best out of themselves, helping them feel good, feel safe, and helping them even in their personal lives. And so related to that, I wanted to ask you, this comes up in relation to pay and benefits. What's your view on sort of radical transparency around disclosing salaries and benefits, and both outside the company and inside the company? Is that something that you think can be helpful, or is it dangerous to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you're able to disclose, for example, something like salary or benefits, that generally speaking, you should. If you think about it from a time standpoint, right, you could go down the whole interview avenue with a job seeker only to find that, salaries don't match up. And then you just spent all that time with that particular candidate. So from a time savings, I'm always an advocate for complete transparency. But when you think about, again, what those conversations today look like from job seekers and how they're looking for lifestyle changes, they want to know a lot of the things up front now. On job descriptions. They're forming their opinion about you before they even get on the phone with you. So as much as possible, whatever you can disclose to give them a full kind of idea of what it's really like, how much you pay, what kind of benefits they can start envisioning using, they are jumping mentally 2 feet into the opportunity before you're even on the phone with them. So you want to do that as much as possible, I think.
Okay, so I want to shift gears, but I'm actually, the next question is related to this point of transparency, and I'll sort of connect the dots in a second. I want to ask about how employer brand can be used to reach candidates from less traditional places, whether it's underrepresented groups or whether it's parts of the market that you wouldn't normally attract. And the reason it's connected to the transparency we just discussed is, I know of a company that, as part of their diversity efforts, they did research and worked out that people from underrepresented groups, particularly women, are less likely to sort of go in hard and negotiate on pay, and so they're disadvantaged. And so what they did was they basically said, we never negotiate. We determine in advance what the pay is, and the only thing we let you choose is stock versus cash. You can, and so they don't negotiate, and that way they ensure that it's equitable, and men or whoever, like, people don't end up getting paid more because they negotiate harder. And I thought that was a really interesting way to sort of do that, and I hadn't seen that approach before. So I'm curious, beyond the transparency, what else, particularly in this market where it is harder to get applicants, and you might need to go to places that you hadn't accessed before in the market, is there a role employer brand can play to help companies reach those candidates that are, sort of, whether it's underrepresented groups, whether it's underserved, those sort of communities, underestimated communities?
Absolutely. So first of all, there is talking about a job description, leading with your job descriptions to make sure that your language is inclusive. Not only that, is your language gender neutral? So just even from that standpoint, your job descriptions, your blurbs that you're putting out on your career sites, all of those materials have a feeling to them and have an aspect to them that really dictates who it resonates with. Not only that, something that Salesforce is doing to really take advantage of, trying to find the best talent, period, right, regardless of the location, is hiring for time zones. So really looking at like an opportunity and seeing who is this team that is going to be, hiring for this role, and where does this person really need to be or cater to in terms of time zone. That really opens up the candidate pool, if you think about it, to really looking at talent from all locations that adhere to that or that could work in that time zone. So it's opening up, right, being transparent and saying, like, for example, company like Dropbox, where on their job descriptions they have the actual title and it says location flexible, right? Having those changes of wording and alignment between all of the places that your careers are being posted and just manifest, that's going to amplify certain aspects of your culture. That tells people, hey, this is a place where we meet our people where they are, versus we're demanding this and that, and you just fit the bill or you don't. So
okay, so that's really interesting. So you touched on time zones, culture, hiring remotely, language and job descriptions, and they're all connected. There's a challenge there around, we want to have a unified employer brand, but clearly we're going to have people who, for a global company, from different cultures with different expectations. And language is important, and we might in the US speak in a certain way, and in Eastern Europe that might be interpreted differently. So the first question I have, and I'm going to start weaving in questions. We've got about 50 questions from the audience, so apologies we can't get to all of them, but I'll start weaving in some of them. One of the questions that came up was managing employer brand across different cultures. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that when we want to be one company, and one brand, but clearly that's not how the world works.
Absolutely. So I think one place to start is knowing where your ideal candidates or where they're coming from, right? And just knowing your audience and who you're speaking to. And then as you're formulating like your EVP or your employer brand materials or your employer brand briefs or whatever it is, like your marketing slogans or hashtags, you want to pressure test those. So you want to make sure that it's resonating with different parts of your organization, not just coming from like HR or, wherever employer brand sits within your organization. You want to be pressure testing it and seeing, is this right? Does it resonate? Does it feel good? And including those differences and perspectives. That's why diversity especially is really key. As you have good representation within your organization, you're able to run this by a lot of folks and just make sure that it is, in alignment with your audiences. So.
And maybe some of those folks we run it via the employees of our own company in that geography. And we've had a couple of questions in the feed now around, you touched on this earlier, tapping into our existing employees. And I think my sense is that a lot of employer brand practitioners understand that, but maybe they're finding it challenging to do that effectively. So are there strategies or advice you can give for how to do that well, for how to really get the existing employees involved and become advocates and speak publicly or help the employer brand effort? What can we do with our existing employees?
Yeah, you can carve out opportunities for them to be heard. So how can you amplify employee stories? Whether it's a call, like a submission for stories. What do you love best about working here at this organization? Or what is most challenging to you right now? Something like that could happen. Or you can tap into your different, if you have employee resource groups, that's usually a good place to go ahead and take a good listen as to what people are talking about and what really matters. And what folks are sensitive about, what people want to hear more about, what they need more support on, etc. You could also be using surveys within your organization to take a pulse check and just note that, people's sentiment changes through the season. So this is not a one and done, but something you might want to take a look at maybe biannually. At Salesforce, we have our 2 times a year employee opinion survey come out. And we make all those results transparent to everyone in the company so that people are more willing to participate and really say what is true, right? Because they know where their results are going and that it will be transparent to all. So those are just 3 methods that you can take to really carve out the opportunity.
Presumably from the engagement survey, there are some, nuggets or some insights, positive insights that you can then take. And what then happens? Do you share them as quotes, or do you actually, I don't know, I assume the survey is anonymous. Can you find a way to how do you get to those employees and say, hey, you're such an advocate, we'd like to put you on a video or whatever? Is there a way to sort of tangibly utilize that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you could do surveys that are anonymous, and then you could also do surveys that are where they can volunteer their information. And if they'd like to be contacted, absolutely. And when you think about opportunities to spotlight people, right? It's not just for what they say, but also what they do. Any sort of like background profiles on people that, they started off in sales and moved into another part of the org. Those are great stories also, like for internal mobility and career growth, which we know is one of the top aspects that all generations in the workforce today are looking for. Career growth is a big one.
I want to ask you about, this is a question that's come up a lot. I think intuitively, people understand all this and they can see the benefit, but is it measurable? And if I'm an employer brand practitioner and I want budget and I want to build a system, at some point that's going to cost money, and someone in the company is going to say, look, I get this, but you're asking for X dollars. Are there financial benefits? Are there tangible benefits to the company? Show me. And presumably people want to be convinced of that. is ROI something that possible in employer branding, or is it elusive?
Yes. So I think every organization is going to face its challenges for calculating exact ROI. What do you have access to in terms of data? So I think you should be very much in lockstep with what the numbers are looking like for your candidate pipeline for recruiting, and keeping a tab on how it changes per different campaigns that you push out from employer brand. For example, we are, focused on for women in sales. And as we have released a particular video, right, on attracting women in sales, we're also taking a look at our traffic and seeing, who's visiting our site and what they're saying about it, and if there's more traction in that actual kind of subset or tribe of people that we're looking to attract. So yes, it's about looking at what data elements you have that you can track over time, and marry it to actual activities you're doing in the employer brand space to see what changes and when, and kind of, take it from there.
Okay, that's a great example. So am I getting more applicants from this demographic, for example, more women? Sure. Or more people? So you can actually track that and say, we've run this campaign targeted at women returning to the workforce, and now we're getting more women apply for jobs. I mean, is it as simple as that? Is that an example of a win?
That is an example of a win for sure. Now, when you could really take a look at the intersectionality of people and not just focus like on one aspect of people, but like, okay, yes, women, we're getting more applicants. How about, let's say, working parents? Are we getting more attraction there? How about, folks from a particular different country or what have you? Are we getting more traction there? Is our traffic spiking? And so like the objective isn't really to have more candidates, but it's to see movement, and that you're helping shape the movement, really.
And you're impacting that.
Yes, that you're impacting who's being attracted to the organization.
Okay. Conscious of time, so we might take a final question and then summarize and wrap. So you gave an example before of a company that you didn't name, but that you saw is doing some really good stuff. Also, without naming, is there a company or multiple companies or themes that you see that maybe are, I don't want to say doing it wrong, but that have some blind spots? Are there themes around, what's a theme that you see around, this is an area that I really would love companies to improve in, and you see a lot of Salesforce's customers, and maybe I think this is something that's harder to talk about, but without naming names, I think people want to hear the feedback. So what's an area that we might have a blind spot in, or that we might want to improve in, and that you see across the board in the market?
Yes. One thing for sure is that not enough organizations, in my opinion, are approaching their employer brand with a beginner's mind. When you look at your employer brand strategy, just know that some people might not have ever seen your organization before. So you have this opportunity to make an impact and give context as to who you are in every single touch point you have externally. So that's one thing that I've seen. Also, just from visuals, people who are all, white males. I've seen this very recently on a career site where the whole career site was white males. And so, thinking about how you're showing up in your visuals as well is something that is worth 1,000 words. We know that, right? From pictures. So visuals, a very easy way to reflect who it is you want to attract. People want to see themselves in, your visuals. They want to envision themselves there, and they can only do that when they see it, for the most part. So those are just two things that I think you can take action off of right away.
Okay, that's great. Particularly the first one around assuming everyone knows everything about you, whereas in reality, probably they know very little, even if they've heard of your logo. That's a great point. So let's sort of summarize some of the key themes that came up today. For me, what I took away was relevant to employees, not just attraction. Engage your employees. Think about culture. Think about how you come across the different countries or different geographies, different locations. be real, be relevant to now, offer benefits that are relevant to people, not just at any time, but right now, figure out what people care about. Be conscious of the final example you gave around how you're representing yourself, the white male example. Is that really your company, or is that just a bad stock image that you put on your website that's going to do you a disservice?
Mm-hmm.
And really tap into the things that people care about that will make them want to join your company, not just the sort of the fake perks.
Right.
Have I missed anything? Hopefully that covers most of what. Was there anything that I missed?
I just wanted to ride on that very last point you made. And it's just like about superficial, right? Versus now what people are looking for is just so much deeper, because the stakes are so much higher for everyone. Everyone is, bending over backwards to work harder and balance work and life. So the work really has to mean something. And so if you could bring out that point, I think that speaks volumes much over those perks that used to be kind of the sexy factor.
What a great point to end on. The work really has to mean something. Lindagrace, it's been great to have you. You're doing such interesting work at Salesforce, and I've learned a lot from this conversation. Hopefully the audience has as well. Thanks so much for spending 30 minutes with us, plus all the prep work we did. And thanks to everyone for joining. And next week we're continuing the series with another session on the skills shortage. And if you couldn't join today, then listen to the recording. And Lindagrace, thanks again. Thanks so much. It's been great to have you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.